pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I call the meeting of June 20, 2019 to order of the Chatham Town Board. On our agenda, one of the first pieces of business is that we plan to have our town attorney and our town planner here, and we plan to address the vote for the new zoning law. However, yesterday there was found a discrepancy in the existing law, and the town attorney advised us to hold up that vote. So if you are here tonight for the vote, there will be no vote. And that discrepancy had to do with a particular item from a state executive law passed in 2015. And Councilman or Deputy Supervisor Bob Balcom will explain the discrepancy. We wanted to hold up the law to rectify that discrepancy and pass a law that would not be jeopardized.
A comment came in from a citizen that is very familiar with housing authority, and that citizen directed us to take a look at an executive law, which is really unusual, because generally we deal with general municipal law and town law. But there was a little law that was inserted into the executive law November of 2015, kind of unusual. You can almost see the lobbyists at work there. But what it had to do with is manufactured homes and in residential areas. And that law has a requirement now that manufactured homes that are placed on a permanent foundation must be in all residential, be allowed to be in all residential districts, okay? So that caused a problem for us because we were using a piece of old code that made it through, it followed the comprehensive plan, and it was sitting there, and then that piece of code, it's 18062B, doesn't comply with law now. So when you change that, of course, you have to go back through and look at everything else and see how that might affect the rest of the law, which has been initially done. But now the attorney has to actually the planner is going to make the adjustments, the attorney has to okay them, and then they're returned to the town board. And by law, when that happens, we have to wait 10 days.
Business day.
Yeah, 10 days, well, not Sundays, and not holidays.
Sorry.
So it's 10 days. We have to figure that out yet when we can vote. But that little piece, good that it was brought to our attention. And we have, we made quick work to try to fix it. But now the ramification is we can't vote tonight. But we will go through everything that we would have gone through for you. We'll get through our business pretty quickly tonight, and then it'll be open to the public forum as usual, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Bob.
No vote tonight. Would you communicate with us, please, how we may communicate with the town in the immediate future?
This is a public meeting that's governed by the rules of this body. So if you have some questions or statements, please hold them for the public comment section. We're going to go into comments now by the town board members. And these comments have been formulated in response to their feelings and their opinions on this law and how they plan to vote. So, Councilman Weldon, would you please start?
Nothing like a full house to get the blood pumping. First, I have to say how gratifying it is to see so many of you here this evening. It's through citizen involvement that government can best serve the needs of the people of our town. I know that some of you feel you don't have time to get involved with town issues, but it's precisely because dozens of town residents made time to volunteer to serve on committees and planning and zoning boards, working alongside elected officials for hours, weeks, months, and even years, that we have been able to update the zoning law that was scheduled to be voted on here tonight. Ours is a diverse community made up of residents whose families have lived here for generations, as well as some who've only been here maybe 20 or 30 years, or maybe even just arrived to open a business on our main street in the village. Some of us live here 365 days of the year, while others spend a good deal less time. But whether we live on a large rural property or a small house in the village or one of the hamlets, each of us has something very important to bring to our community. With nearly 4,000 residents, it's easy to imagine that everyone might not agree on all things, especially when it comes to the question of what we're allowed to do on our own property. There are some residents who feel land use should be highly regulated, while some others believe they should be able to do whatever they like on their own land. But as we are a community, there may be times that each of us must compromise for the greater good of that community. None of us live in a vacuum, and our actions will most certainly affect those that are living around us. Striking a balance can be difficult, and the ultimate goal would be for the most people to get the most of what they want. Landing somewhere in the middle does not mean any individual's concerns have not been heard, but rather that many varied concerns were heard and compromises had to be made. As for the short-term rental regulations on a use that was not permitted in the old zoning, adjustments have been made after several of the public hearings, shifting the regulations one way or another. For example, the 30-day aggregate short-term rental allowance for any Chatham homeowner is far beyond what several pro-short-term rental advocates found acceptable last fall, but now find unsatisfactory. Successful communities must plan for the future to avoid problems down the line. The over 300 short-term rentals in Hudson are wreaking havoc on the housing market there. And yes, I've been told many times that Chatham is not Hudson. But who could have imagined 20 years ago that a 2-bedroom apartment to rent there would be nearly impossible to find, or that so many people would even want to? Chatham is already in the position of not being able to hold on to its newly hired teachers because they cannot afford to buy or even rent a home here. With the improvement of rural internet service and the possibility of train service returning to Chatham in the future, unless someone builds a wall at each exit ramp of the Taconic, our population will continue to evolve. And we as a community must work to head off problems before they arise, rather than do nothing and face unanticipated trouble. We must not let the diversity of our population divide us, but rather draw upon it to give us strength as we, as a community, plan for the future together. Thank you.
First, I would like to thank members of all committees who put countless hours into the development of this zoning law. I would like to thank Bob Balcom and Maria Lull, who were primarily responsible for providing leadership in getting this difficult task accomplished. I would also like to thank many citizens who came forth and had the good sense to familiarize themselves with the zoning document and use public comment as a forum to make constructive comments and suggestions. I recognize that this zoning law is not perfect, but I'm voting to pass it for many reasons having to do with governance of our town. Philosophically, zoning is a hot-button issue because it raises the never-ending tension between the individual and the community. I've been aware of this inherent tension as I considered how best to compromise among competing interests. I'm well aware that the individual property owner has rights, but I also believe that the person next door has rights that need to be considered also. I've participated in all kinds of administrative tasks, including subcommittees, workshops, and public hearings, because I believe that when a town takes the time to make an effort to grapple with a problem, it leads first to conflict and frustration, but ultimately to better clarity about details of of how the town wants to address an issue of governance. This is the second difficult community debate Chatham has had about a comprehensive plan and zoning. From all reports, the first, which occurred in the early 70s, was just as lively as this one. I believe those who had the courage to pass the existing zoning law were way ahead of their time. When I compare how surrounding towns have fared with growth, I believe Chatham's existing law has done a great deal to preserve our rural quality. Was the law perfect? No. Was it in need of update? Yes. Is this perfect? Is this proposed law perfect? No. But it is as well conceived as it can be at the end of a long, arduous process. My vote to pass this proposed law is also made with the commitment from the board that there will be an ongoing process to improve the law and a committee established to update the comprehensive plan. I cannot deny that the new zoning laws are based on a 10-year-old plan, but I believe that when the comprehensive plan is updated, many perspectives about what people want and how those goals will be achieved will be similar to the old plan, more similar to the old plan than radically different. For me, it is more prudent to move forward now. One of the most important underlying strengths of the new law is that it reflects a better understanding of how special use permits affect the development of a town. The old law seemed to have an underlying rule of thumb. If a use is controversial, require a special use permit. The problem with that approach is that in New York State, it's clear that if the use is legal with a special use permit, the town is basically authorizing the use and can only modify it through mitigation. Unfortunately, mitigation just cleans up a project. Over time, cumulative mitigation on multiple projects changes the nature of a town in ways that many have not intended. The new law shifts away from such heavy reliance on special use permits and resulting litigation as a primary way of approaching difficult use issues. Many more difficult choices were made about what uses were consistent with the comprehensive plan and what uses were not. For those uses considered consistent with the plan, where specific regulations were made so a use would reflect what is considered desirable for a particular zoning district. Overall, the most notable addition to permitted uses in the proposed law is the inclusion of short-term rentals as a use. When the second committee submitted its work to the board, it became clear that the board needed further deliberation about this new usage. It deliberated, it consulted the public, it sought advice from its land use attorney and its planner. I think the resulting zoning regulations are a fair compromise among competing interests that are based on sound guiding principles. The proposed regulations use the concept of home occupation as the umbrella for the authorizing this use. The definition allows a resident to earn an extra income by renting out part or all of their domicile. It allows a resident to do this as much as the resident wants, provided the resident meets a set of regulations and limitations. It even gives non-resident property owners the right on a more limited basis. Parts of the regulations on short-term rentals are clearly designed to limit commercial investors from buying a property in a residential zone with the intent of using that property exclusively as a commercial short-term rental, not a residence. It also discourages potential second homeowners from buying a property with the idea of renting it for more than 30 days. The intent of the new zoning regulation is to keep our residential areas residential, places where you know your neighbor. It is also intended to encourage commercial development in business zones. If one reads the law, one will understand that it offers more protection for our diverse topographies, adds water resources and roads that must be considered when developing a town. I believe that when the comprehensive plan is reviewed, Farming will remain a linchpin for the town's future, as it has been in the past. The law offers liberal rights to various farm-related activities so that we can continue, so we can help 21st century farming remain viable. I'm voting yes on the proposed zoning law. I hope that the residents of Chatham can work together to improve this new law in the years ahead. We need people who will focus on how to eliminate overregulation, help better enforcement, and analyze what went wrong when the law does not have its intended effect. Stay involved, and you will find out the truth. This is a progressive government that strives for transparency and works hard to bring people together and improve our town.
I'm Michael Richardson. I first came onto the board in November 15th of last year to fill a vacancy due to a resignation. I was not part of the comprehensive plan. Actually, during those years, I was spending a good deal of my time, as much as 2/3 in Nicaragua, on a particular program there. When I came back to Chatham on a full-time basis, I did become involved with the town in assisting with their financial matters on a voluntary basis, but I still was not involved with planning and zoning. I was then asked to join the Zoning Board of Appeals in January of 2018. So when it came to the comprehensive plan and what was now in front of the town board as far as the new zoning law, I had a lot of education that I needed to get for myself. And I turned to the people that had been working on the comprehensive plan. Now, I've heard several times it said that the town board is not listening. And I have to say that the town board is listening to many, many voices. On those people